It's me, Adrian, or Ayden. Either way, I am still your host, and you are still listening to Susto, the podcast of paranormal folklore from Latin American cultures. Welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. We are in the full swing of the new year, and today I am coming at you with, as you've seen in the title, an interview featuring Dr. Bianca Flores, aka LaTarotina. This is a very interesting episode to me personally. Listen, this episode was for me. Sorry. But it was so good. Dr. Flores and I interacted on TikTok just a couple weeks ago, and I left a comment. I was like, this sounds so cool. I love the work that you're doing. And before I could even send her a message, she responded to my comment. She was like, get me on the show. And I was like, bet. So that's what this is all about. It is all about the neuroscience and the metaphysical, the crossover of that, which is the work that Dr. Flores does. So we're going to jump into that very soon. I don't want to take too much of your time here because it is a really good episode. I will say though, if you want, get your Googles ready. There was a couple things that I tried to clarify, some really interesting words that I had never heard before that I think Dr. Flores did a great job of explaining either way. But in case you want, I'm letting you know there is some, hey, we're talking to a doctor today, an actual doctor, a scientist. So I'm very, very excited for that. But I will say before we get into that episode, as always, if you would like your own story on a Letters from the Beyond episode, you already know how to do that. Visit sustopodcast.com and hit the submit story button, or you can visit my link tree. That's linktr.ee/susto and hit that submit story button. If you'd like to support Susto, the easiest way to do so is to follow and engage wherever you are listening, leave positive ratings and reviews and comments like this one from Miss Unknown. On the first episode of Susto, Miss Unknown, are you listening from the very beginning? Welcome. Miss Unknown said, hey Ayden, I'd like to remain anonymous, but how can we protect ourselves from La Llorona? I am from Austin, Texas, but my family is from Jalisco, Mexico. Miss Unknown, I'm in Austin. Maybe we can team up and figure out how to keep her away, right? Miss Unknown continues, every time I go to Mexico, I always hear La Llorona crying and saying, ay, mis hijos. Honestly, it pisses me off. Girl, yeah. I encountered her as a kid, but it's a story for another time. Miss Unknown, I need you to send that story in. And I was terrorized. I'm used to paranormal since I'm from Texas and not afraid, but I do get pissed. So basically, how do we protect ourselves, or how do we prevent La Llorona? I mean, I'm going to tell you what my mom told me growing up, which was do not go near those bodies of water at night. I think just in general, that's a good rule. Llorona or not, because if something were to happen, if you were to fall in, it's dark, it's hard to see. So let's stay away from bodies of water at night. As far as preventing her or protecting ourselves, I think distance is the key, right? Is if you hear those cries, you create some distance between you. If you're in a home, lock the doors, close the windows, all that. If you have your other protections, you can light herbs, resins, incense. Copal is one of my go-tos. It's one of my favorites. If you believe in prayer or spells, use those. Honestly, I think the power resides in you, but I think above all, don't be a kid, right? That's what she's after. Just don't be a kid. Grow up. No, I'm kidding. Miss Unknown, thank you so much for sending that comment in. All right, now we will go ahead and jump into today's episode. I hope that you all enjoy this one as much as I did. It was so much fun. Please welcome Dr. Bianca Flores, aka LaTarotina. I'm very excited for this interview. This is really cool because we found each other on TikTok literally a week ago, and immediately we were like, let's do this, which is so cool. And it's funny because I'm constantly saying on the show, I'm not a ghost doctor, I'm not a brain doctor or whatever. And now we have a real doctor on Susto. Dr. Bianca Flores, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Very, very excited. Thank you. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, if you haven't seen her page yet, Dr. Bianca Flores is a neuroscientist and a tarot and Lenormand card reader. Did I pronounce that one right?
Yeah,
Okay,
Lenormand card reader, yeah.
perfect. So for those of us who are not doctors and who are not neuroscientists, I want to give just a really brief sort of what the Google search gave me, or rather the National Institutes of Health. They say that neuroscience aims to understand how the nervous system works to produce and regulate emotion, thought, behavior, and critical bodily functions, including breathing and keeping the heart beating. But I would like to hear from the actual doctor herself. Can you tell us a bit about neuroscience and your study of neuroscience?
Yeah. So Okay. My actual study of neuroscience. So I'm academically trained. I did doctoral training in neuroscience. My research back when I was in graduate school focused on the peripheral nervous system. So I really focused on everything outside of the brain, which was fun and interesting, and I
Yeah.
feel like doesn't get enough funding love, but I know there's a
Yeah.
lot of places that aren't getting enough funding love right now. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I very much am in line with the definition from the NIH. I think it's a pretty good description. We're always trying to understand, what we're thinking. Like everybody has brains, right? We all have brains, and we also want to know, I think, how we function. I think it's like an innate desire in humans to understand, like, why are we like this? Why do we do this? What is this? What is this really about? And our brain really controls all of that. And so anyway, so that that was my focus in graduate school. And then I can go into like a little bit more of the background if that's helpful, like
Yeah,
how.
I absolutely. I think it would be really cool to hear about your journey. I also love how generous you are in saying that everybody has brains because I don't know, I've met some people where I'm like, is there anything in there? Please, like I know it's hollow. But absolutely, I think we would love to hear about the rest of your journey, like in your doctorate program, especially because unfortunately, we know that Latinas are severely
Mhm,
underrepresented as
mhm.
people with PhDs. And
Yeah,
so definitely want to take a moment to give you your flowers for that.
thank you.
Congratulations, because that's amazing.
Thank you so much.
But also, yeah, I want to hear more about what that was like for you.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll start like kind of in the beginning. So I went to undergrad at the University of Rochester in upstate New York, where I studied neuroscience. Um, Part of the reason being, so I was like a weird kid in high school. I just like studied a lot. I love to study. I love to learn. And I was always really interested in the brain, but more specifically, how the brain affected everything else. So, like, now there's a lot of really good research that shows how the brain affects the body.
Hmm.
But back, like, 10, 15 years ago, there wasn't that kind of research. And I remember being in high school. So I did the IB program, the International Baccalaureate program. So if
Hmm.
anybody who is listening knows what that is, like, shout out to all the other IBers. But basically, it's just like an academic program, kind of similar to AP, except the
Hmm.
classes are 2 years. And you kind of have to do, like, you basically do like a senior thesis. And I did mine on psychoneuroimmunology, which is
Whoa.
basically how the mind affects the body. And the person who coined that term was at the University of Rochester doing research, hence why I wanted to go there and do research with him. But the year I got there, he retired. So I was just like, well, we'll study neuroscience, it'll be fine. And then I got into a research lab that focused on Huntington's disease. And so, for people who aren't familiar with it, it's a rare genetic disorder that causes really severe disabilities with people. Most kids that get it don't survive to adulthood, so it's pretty serious.
Hmm.
And then right after undergrad, I went directly into my PhD program at Vanderbilt, where I did my PhD in neuroscience. And like I said, during my graduate school work, I focused on peripheral neuropathy. So if you've ever had the feeling of like your hands tingling and it's like super painful, peripheral neuropathy is kind of like that, except a lot more intense, a lot more
Oh,
painful. There's different, like, it can feel like not, knives and needles in your extremities. The particular form I studied is interesting because I'm not familiar. I don't know if you're familiar with this region of Canada that's like really well studied in the scientific community, because when French colonizers came over to this particular region, it's called the Charlevoix Lac Saint Jean region. Or no, sorry, Saint Lac Jean. I confused the terms, but anyway.
okay.
So Charlevoix region, a lot of people in this area have these very rare inherited diseases due to the interbreeding that happened, because they can trace it to like one specific French couple who came over.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so the disease I studied came from that region, and it's just a rare form of inherited peripheral neuropathy. In some cases, some of the kids, their halves of their brain didn't connect because they were
Oh,
missing
wow.
their the region that's called the corpus callosum, and the corpus callosum connects the two halves of our brain. So there are some cases where the kids are missing that, and they can have really severe disabilities, intellectual disabilities, or have severe seizures, things like that. So I looked at mouse models that had that form of disease. And yeah, I loved doing my PhD. I loved learning. It was a lot of fun. It was like the best of times, the worst of times.
Yeah.
I always tell people that.
That's what I hear from a lot of people who get like their graduate degrees. Like even
Yeah.
with master's programs and like
Yeah.
PhDs. I've considered getting my master's program, and my boyfriend
Yeah.
and my ghostwriter here at Susto, he has his master's, and I think one thing he told me was that it's kind of like a test of how stubborn someone is.
Yes.
So I can imagine a PhD, that's a little bit, I think, more intense. But I do want to go back to something that you
Yeah.
just said that really stuck out to me, was essentially like a really nice kind of pocketed, tight explanation of neuroscience is how the mind affects the body.
Mhm.
And I think that is really relevant to the conversation that we're about to have and to the work that obviously that you do and to things that I've spoken about on this show, because the title of the show itself, Susto. And
Mhm.
I'm sorry, listeners, that I'm always giving the definition, I'm always talking about it, but that's what it's all about, right? Is
Yeah.
it's Susto. It's a cultural illness. It's a phenomenon. I know that you're well aware of this, but that's it right there. It is something that happens in the mind and also in the spirit that
Mhm.
then can affect the body physically. It
Yes.
manifests physically. And so
Yes.
I think there are, well, not I think, there are a ton of articles, academic, anecdotal, that I come across in doing this work, and I have books here too, that it's all about that. It's all about like the
Mhm.
neurological
Mhm.
link between the concept or the illness of Susto and like how that impacts people's lives. And so, I mentioned earlier that you are a card reader, but you also do a lot of metaphysical work. And so I'm really, really interested to talk about that crossover. Like, how did you get into the metaphysical? I feel like it's just subconsciously part of so many Latina people's lives,
I agree.
especially those of us raised like in the Catholic Church. There's this almost
Mhm.
inevitable kind of
Mhm.
cross into like folk Catholicism or like folk magic, right? And you've also mentioned online that it's also been part of your life, and your
Mhm.
parents were a bit into it as well. So again, I'm curious how these things cross over, but also how you made your way into metaphysical work.
So my mom was, from my memory, she was always into this. And later on when I had a conversation with her, she said before, when my oldest sister was first born, she really wasn't into it, but then my other sister and I were born, she's like, I started getting more into it. I wanted to be more open-minded. And so
Hmm.
she I remember going to metaphysical fairs with her when I was a kid. And she was always she's also a strong devotee of Guadalupe, and she has very strong Catholic faith, but she also very much is dabbles in the metaphysical, believes in the
Hmm.
metaphysical and energy work and all of that. She does Reiki on her dogs and stuff.
Oh, but
um,
also, who hasn't had their dog
right?
like gotten like
Right.
like varida with the huevo or something, some form of energy healing or like limpia?
Yeah, yeah, we've definitely yeah, we've done those too. And then my dad, I think he still has a little bit of trouble admitting it, but I know from his past and his youth era, he was really into a lot of candle work and all of that good stuff. And he's like a double Scorpio. He's like a Scorpio sun, Scorpio rise, or Scorpio moon. And so he has a lot of these spidey senses. And I think
Hmm.
that's just
Yeah.
very common. And also in a lot of Latino families that we just have spidey senses that are just off the charts.
Oh yeah.
And he it wasn't until my adult life that I started asking him more about it. And he's slowly opening up about it. But in terms of the foray and getting into it, um, I was kind of always open to it, but it wasn't until graduate school. So I had a canon event. I just had this really terrible relationship in my 20s. It was really bad. He was kind of manipulative, emotionally abusive, just really all the
Ugh.
terrible things, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard, right? Because grad school, I always tell people when they are thinking about graduate school, they also have to prepare themselves to deal with any issues they have, because all that stuff comes up during that time, because graduate school is an emotionally trying time. You are in a system that gaslights you all the time, that questions your credibility, that questions your intelligence, all of that. So therefore that bleeds into the rest of your life. Anyway, at least that's been my experience. So all of these issues just kind of come up and you have to be ready to deal with them. As well, I was dealing with that relationship where I was like, I was also getting gaslit all the time. I was also like questioning my self-worth, things like that. And he was from another culture. And I came to the conclusion that he was doing metaphysical work on me. Uh,
Mm.
and I was like, because what I noticed, like, there are two things can be true at once, right? Like,
Yeah.
somebody can be emotionally exhaustive and an energy vampire from you, to you, and like draining your energy. And also, they can be doing things in the metaphysical and still draining your energy.
Yeah.
And so that's the conclusion that I came to in graduate school. And then finally, I was able to leave that relationship, thank God. But after that, I had a lot of like stress and trauma from it. And so I went to like Mexican healers. Like I
Yeah.
did the therapy work, right? I like got
Mm-hmm.
the free therapy from Vanderbilt, thank you. But also I went to Mexican healers and I was telling my mom like, look, I can't explain it, like, and she knows everything. I've told her everything and why I think he was dabbling in the metaphysical arts. But it was to the point where I was like frightened and scared and I was like, I don't know what he did, but he did something scary. Yeah. Just I could tell you like a lot of crazy stories, but we won't, that's not what
Oh my
this is about. The
God.
point is
Yeah.
we became empowered, we found our power, but it was like talking to these healers and doing the energy work with them. It's like, what am I scared of? There is nothing
Oh.
to be afraid of.
Oh.
Like you, because especially like I think talking to a lot of these Mexican healers or healers in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just say Mexican because like that's the culture I come from, that's what I'm used to.
Mm-hmm.
There is a sense of work that they do and that you as a healer have to do to hold yourself accountable, to work through your own BS, to work through your own traumas. Therefore, you're then able to explain and communicate and transfer that wisdom to the people that you work with so that they can do the same for themselves. And so one I remember one of the things like that just like resonated with me when I was telling, you know, him like my Mexican healer that I was talking to at the time, like my story and what was happening and how scared I was. And he's like, I know nothing about where he's from, but what I know, I'm from Mexico and I do this and blah. He was like standing on his shit. He's
Yes.
like, they don't know anything about Mexicans and this is what we do. And I was like, yes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
I so bad. I'm gonna treat my headphone cord like hair and I'm just gonna like toss it
Yes.
back. I just really quick before we continue this, like I want to like give you a hug and be like,
Thank you
fuck
so much.
yes, diva. Especially that question that you asked. That is such a powerful question, and I want everybody to ask themselves that question when they get a chance. What are you actually scared of?
Mhm.
Because it's really hard. I've been in a similar position in a really toxic, abusive relationship. And then it's weird when that, I guess some people may call it like shadow work,
Mhm.
or sometimes like something really, everybody pull your bingo cards out. The word's going to come out. It's a really traumatic event
Yeah.
that might have to like do that shift for you. Is
Mhm.
you, when you're able to see it from that perspective and like ask, if I could write this, and maybe sometimes you need to actually physically write it down. Write down, what am I actually scared of? Like
Mhm.
that can hand over so much
Mhm.
power to you,
Mhm.
because sometimes it's like, oh, this isn't real, or this doesn't matter, or
It's
I'm
not my fear to
stronger than
carry.
this.
Yeah.
It's not my fear to carry. Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm just like, and for those of you who are not on video, because video is for Patreon only, but if you're watching video, you're gonna see me just like constantly throwing my hands up and tossing my headphone cord around, because yes, everything you're saying is just so like, oh, I feel so like, especially we're recording this the week of January 16th. We all know what's been happening in the world, but
Yeah.
hearing this conversation, I think is really like, I can feel it like, it's like a deep breath, it's like filling up my lungs again. So thank you for that, because these are all very powerful messages that I think, even if we've been through that metamorphosis, we need to continually hear it and to share it with each other. So, oh
Yeah.
my God. Okay. Sorry to interrupt. I
No,
just needed
no, no
to
worries.
go
Anytime.
off for a moment.
But like during that time as well, I think because I was like, can I do better? Like I am doing better for myself academically. I'm about to be a doctor. Like my life needs to change and I need to start acting like that, right? So then I started getting into more self work. I went so because I was in Nashville, they don't have botanicas there, right? They have
Mhm.
metaphysical shops. And so I went into a metaphysical shop to get my cards read, and it wasn't tarot. They did Lenormand, because
Mm.
like Lenormand is a lot more prominent in the South, because Lenormand is actually a French German card like form of cartomancy. And so French colonizers came in through the South, and that's why Lenormand's more popular there. You'll be able to find more Lenormand readers there. And I went and I realized as he was pulling the cards, I was reading along with him. I was like, oh,
Mm.
I think I can do this. And
Yeah.
so then I got a deck for myself and I started pulling cards every day and I enjoyed it so much. And I started pulling cards for my friends. Then like friends and family would call me. And it was kind of, again, at the same time as I was like graduating, leaving that relationship, those things were coming in. And so then I graduated, and right after graduate school, I did my postdoc at Johns Hopkins, where I studied how the brain was affected in HIV patients, or so how
Mm.
HIV affects the brain. And I did a lot of lab work. I worked with patient samples and like got their cells, and it was all really good and interesting work, but it was also during the height of the pandemic. And so
Mm.
there's just like a lot of things going on at that time where I was stressed. I knew I didn't want to be in the lab forever. I loved my PI. She was wonderful. She was a really great boss and just like a really amazing researcher. But again, there was like the thing of like, I don't feel like I am where I'm supposed to be. And I
Mm-hmm.
also am like in this system where everybody's getting gaslit still. And like my boss at the time, I mean, still, she's like a world renowned researcher. And
Mm-hmm.
she also happens to be a Black woman. And seeing her at
Mm-hmm.
Hopkins and the way that they questioned her, her credibility, I just like, I was like, yeah, I don't want to bear witness to that,
Yeah.
because it's just one of those things. And like, she deserves better, we deserve better. Like, I just don't want to be in a space and place where I'm constantly having to fight for that, because if she's fighting for that, I gotta fight for that too.
Yeah.
And so so then I decided, okay, so during that time in Baltimore, coming back to the practices, I started really getting back into like my egg cleansings, my card readings, because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I need to re-regulate. Like spending 12 hours in lab just like was not my
Yeah.
my
Mm-hmm.
thing.
It's a
So
literal sterile environment.
yes, yes, and like having to like reawaken myself and not
Mm-hmm.
drain myself after that. And then I left science basically after that. I
Wow.
was able to get a job as a contractor, working remotely with a program that no longer exists anymore, by the way. I was a science officer, and I just like helped review grants for multiple sclerosis research program, but
Wow.
yeah, they don't exist anymore. So, yeah, I mean,
Wow.
but it was like kind of crazy to work for the federal government during that time, even as a contractor.
Yeah.
So again, so during that time when I got that new job, I moved back to Texas. I moved back
Mm-hmm.
to San Antonio, and I spent time with my grandma, which was like really, really good. Now, obviously I'm here in Oklahoma City, but I was raised by my grandma. I like was raised around my grandma. I love my grandma.
Mm-hmm.
She is somebody who is always inspiring to me, but also like that woman, that's the head bruja right there. Like she knows her
Yes. It's always the
shit.
matriarch of the
Yeah.
family.
She just always knew things, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you know things? And it like not just things about like well, definitely things about family members, but like she would call me up and be like, Mija, I had a dream, are you okay? And I like wouldn't be okay.
Yeah. No, literally, I have gotten the same phone call from my mom, who, for the people who do know me personally, my grandmother, I call her my mom because she raised me, and
Yeah,
I've gotten that phone call, or like we'll be talking on the phone, and I'm a Cancer, I'm very like expressive with my emotions too. I wear
yeah,
my heart on my sleeve, and so like we'll be on the phone, and she's like, "Okay, Mijo, we'll talk to you later," and we hang up, and then like 5 minutes later, she calls me back, and she's like, "All right, now you really got to tell me what's happening," and I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah. And you're like, what?
I'm like, how did you like did just pull it out of you? Yeah.
No, they just know. And even still, she'll be like, "Hey, you kept me up all night. You good?" And I'll be like, kind of.
You know the answer.
Yeah, I mean, you already know.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I feel like some sort of like energy thing happened there because like I was able because I always wanted to live with my grandma. I know that sounds weird, but I always wanted to live with my grandma as an adult because I love
Mhm.
my grandma and we're like we vibe, we have fun. Um and during that time I started to get deeper into my cards. I would talk to her a lot more about her experiences and things she wanted to learn, things she couldn't learn. She talked a lot about her dad, so my great grandpa, and
Mhm.
how like he was a healer and how
Wow.
like he would help women who were experiencing infertility issues, that he would help them to get pregnant
Wow.
by like doing massages and doing like different steams and stuff for them and helping them drink teas. I'm like, she's
Wow.
like, yeah, but I don't know how to do
And this
that.
was in San Antonio that he was doing that?
No, this was so the like little municipality that she grew up in is called Candelaria, and it's
Mhm.
like right on the border. Even if you look it up
Oh
now, it's
wow.
like not really a town even. It's just a
Yes.
municipality. It exists,
Mm.
and it's her house, like her backyard had a footbridge to Mexico. It was right there.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. Right on the border.
right on the border.
Wow, that
Yeah.
is so cool. That's such like a I've had this sort of conversation with other people too, where it's been brought up in other uh interviews or something that I've done with people where they're also from the border or they have family from the border and they say that it's just like it's like a magical space. Like the energy is different there, the vibration is different there. Like it's like a liminal space.
Yes.
And I believe that to be true as someone who grew up there. And you have family from the area. Obviously, you're right, your grandparents, but like it's just I don't know, something about the work that gets done there, the spiritual work that gets done there is very, very interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, and I almost feel like it definitely has something to do with all the natural, like all the nature that's just allowed to like thrive there
Hmm.
undisturbed. And I think that has a big part to deal with it. Well, in those kinds of areas, right? Like
Yeah,
in areas where it's like cities and stuff, it's probably a little different, but still has that liminal space energy. But yeah, I feel like
yeah,
it's a big part of it. So
absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, we're gonna take a really quick break. And we're back. So I also wanted to talk about, we mentioned at the top of this, and it's come up a few times
Yeah.
about your work with cards. And I think that there are a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings about cards, especially tarot cards, because those are more, I think, common, they're more widely known. Many people think that they can predict the future or
Mhm.
that they can tell you, what's going to happen next or what your decisions should be. But as someone who has kind of started my own journey into learning tarot, and I've known this for a while too from other people who read tarot professionally have told me that like it's more about introspection. It's used
Mhm.
more for self-reflection, for spiritual guidance,
Mhm.
and exploring like personal challenges and stuff like that. So I'm curious if there are any misconceptions about the cards that you have come across that you would maybe like to dispel, or maybe things that people don't know about the cards that you think they should.
Yes. Okay. So before I started reading cards publicly, like,
Hmm.
and I mean for people I didn't know, for strangers, at pop ups, the biggest thing I think I had to get over again was that fear piece. Because with the cards, like, yes, you can definitely open up different things, but I always tell people it's like protection, protection, protection first, no matter what you do. Um, you always have to call in your protection, but as well, I think there's this fear that people have that you can pick up negative energy just from like the cards and reading somebody. But it's
Mm.
like you can pick up negative energy from just talking to someone, you know? And it's about those boundaries. It's about the hygiene, the spiritual hygiene. Or even let's not even like go there. It's about body hygiene, embodiment hygiene. So like when you have a stressful situation, if you're at work or you have like a really heated conversation, what do you do afterwards to ground yourself? Like how do you do that? Same thing with the cards. It's not anything to be fearful of. It's not like you can catch something from someone. And I'm not saying that hasn't happened or that's not, a thing, but that's not really how it works usually.
Yeah.
Um, I will say, I think the reason that there's a lot of fear around the cards, whether it's tarot, Lenormand, Baraja Español, like all of those cards, I think my belief, and I'll die on this hill, is cards make you self reflect and hold up the mirror of accountability and truth about yourself that
Mm-hmm.
you might not be used to. And people telling the truth about themselves and sitting with it is one of the hardest things that anybody can do. And a lot of people aren't ready for that. So I
Mm.
think that's where a lot of that fear comes from. Even if you try having an open conversation, an honest and open conversation with somebody about how you feel and boundaries you have, that's still kind of hard to do and accept
Yeah.
for people still, especially if it's like you're talking to your parents and setting boundaries, or you're like talking to somebody from an older generation. Like, that's a hard thing to do because
Yeah.
it's not always accepted, and you have to always meet people where they are.
Yeah, it's like that question, that came up earlier. What are
Mhm.
you actually scared of? That it is a hard question to ask, but once you get through that and you answer those questions or you do that reflection, that accountability, it can be very powerful.
Yeah.
But it can also be painful before that. It
Yeah.
can be cathartic.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's really it's. I think it's great that you bring that up, because that's also been part of what I've been discovering too. Is, and I'm learning. So every time I pull a card, I don't really know if it's specifically for me. I think I'm doing just kind of like sort of like familiarizing myself with them. But there are days where I'm like, I really could use something, or like I
Mhm.
really have a question on my mind, or I'm feeling a certain
Yeah.
way and like I
Yeah.
want to address that. And then I pull the card and I'm like, I don't like that.
You're like, I rebuke that
That's
actually.
not the card I wanted. um it's so funny to see those memes when people are like pulling cards from like five different decks and it's the same card and over. Those
Yeah.
are the funniest to me, because yeah, it's definitely it's I think that is such a good way to put that. It's that holding up that mirror to yourself, whether you're doing a reading for yourself or you're getting a reading from someone else. Can you explain a bit more about what the Lenormand cards are? Because, like I
Yes.
said, I think it's very common. We all have seen a tarot deck either in person or online before, right?
Mhm.
Lenormand, I think, is something that I just started seeing maybe a couple months ago.
Mhm.
Um, but I think maybe I have some too. I'm not sure like what would qualify as a Lenormand deck. So if you could
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
lay
yeah.
that out for us.
So, Lenormand, like I mentioned earlier, so Lenormand, Mademoiselle Lenormand was allegedly the card reader and channeler for Napoleon Bonaparte during her time. And so, at that time, everybody would put her name on their deck. So this just happens to be the deck that survived. Now, there are other accounts, like historical accounts, that talk about Lenormand originating in Germany as a parlor game called the Game of Hope. And so Lenormand is a 36 deck of cards, much smaller. It actually draws a lot from like a lot of Christian symbology. So take with that what you will. There's also a
Hmm.
lot of a lot of Christian symbology in tarot and Rider Waite, and we can get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
But so it draws a lot from that symbolism. And I will say, culture, like the culture you come from, really changes the way that you read in Lenormand. So, like, French and German have their own way of reading versus like the American Lenormand readers versus like, the subcultures within the United States, things like that. So it's a 36 deck of cards that starts with the rider, which is essentially a horse, somebody on a horse, and each card represents just different symbols, but also like different stories. So if you're really into storytelling and you love a good story and you love to tell a good story, Lenormand might be the one for you instead of tarot. And I'm not saying don't do both, I love both, but you
Hmm.
might find it easier for you to start with Lenormand, because I didn't learn this way, but I've seen a lot of people teach online this way, that they treat it like a sentence where it's like um, the noun, the verb, the adjective, so that you can read it all as a sentence.
Mm.
And so that's like a really interesting approach,
Yeah.
but also you just read it as a story. So instead of like, so for example, there's a tower card in Lenormand. It means something completely different. The tower card represents organizations, organized groups, also like isolation and loneliness. But depending on the context, it can be, quote unquote, positive or negative. So if you have, the Tower card in line with like the Moon card, again, means something different. To me, I'm like, oh, that reads like you're going to have a lot of responsibilities at work coming up and you're going to be like working really hard or something like that, right?
Mm,
Whereas, like, if you pair the Tower card with, let's say, the Clover, which clover is like, again, representative of like the four-leaf clover, something lucky, something short, something, you know quick. It's like, oh, okay, so then you'll have like a short time where you might experience a period of loneliness, something like that.
mhm.
So it's really just about weaving the story together based on the question that somebody asks. Now, I will say, Lenormand, with asking questions, you do have to be more specific. So you can't be like, how's my day going to be? You can, but I think the answers are better when you, and same thing for tarot, right? It's like when you search in Google, if you search food near me, you're going to get a bunch of restaurants. But if you look for, like, I want a deli sandwich with whatever near me, you'll get those specific answers. So that's a
Interesting.
little bit about the history and the background. Um, I love it. It's my bread and butter. If somebody's really going through it and like wants to know things, I'll go to my Lenormand. I use both interchangeably. I
Yeah.
think they complement each other really well.
Yeah.
But maybe because like I grew up on Lenormand, I
Mhm.
love it so much. So yes, that's a little bit about it.
Well, thank you for that explanation for clearing that up. So now that we have kind of like a solid understanding of, I think, your background and your work and how you've gotten to this, could you tell us, I think your content on TikTok and just across all social media online, I think it's really, really interesting. I think it's super
Thank you.
cool because you do a lot about the crossover of like the neuroscience and specifically tarot cards, but also with like other metaphysical things that I do want to get into.
Yeah.
So we're gonna kind of like run through a couple things, or maybe stroll through them. We don't have to run, right? But I would like to know about the crossover of a few things. So first, can we talk about the crossover of neuroscience and the cards?
Yes. Okay. Um, so do you want me to speak to like what is happening in the brain or like why they match or both?
I think if we could do both, I'm very interested in like what is happening in the
Okay,
brain.
let's start with
Yeah.
that. Yeah, let's go there first. Okay. So first and foremost, when you pick up anything, right, like a deck of cards, you've got your tactile senses that are activated. You're looking at a card for symbols, for imagery that starts with your eyes and your visual cortex, which is like in the back of your head, so occipital lobe. As you're spending time on the card or reading the card, even if it's just one card or a spread of cards, there's a lot going on with a bunch of different brain regions working in tandem. So, number one, I would say obviously visual cortex, but also if you're trying to make sense of the symbols and the context and significance of it, you're also activating, your hippocampus. So hippocampus is associated with learning and memory. And sort of a fun fact about hippocampus, it's named that, like, the origin of the word is like seahorse or something. So it looks like
Okay.
a little, the anatomy is like a little seahorse in your brain. Anyway,
Oh,
so
cute.
so the hippocampus is learning and memory. So when you read a card, you might have certain associations with it from your lived experiences, from your learned experiences as well. Your prefrontal cortex is also doing a lot of work, trying to make sense of, um, different relations or different narratives that you might have. So you've got your prefrontal cortex, you've got your hippocampus, you've also got, your oh my gosh, I'm thinking the DMN, the default mode network, which is
Mhm.
a bunch of different brain regions working together that helped to, um, make sense of self, make sense of narratives, make sense of emotional processing as well. Your insula is at play as well, where your insula is also about like perception. So even if, say, for example, um, you're doing like a pick a card from piles, right? And you're like, I want to do pile one versus pile two. That sort of like introspection and like bodily signals also is can be facilitated by the insula as well.
Wow.
Um, if you have like decks of cards that are like super shiny or have like more tactile things associated with them. So like for
Mhm.
example, like those like metallic cards that have like the little, yeah,
Yeah.
that pulls in your somatosensory cortex. Are you
Wow.
familiar with the homunculus?
No, I don't think
Okay,
so.
so it might be like a cool image to pop up on your Instagram. It's a visual representation of our somatosensory cortex. So it's the idea that our brain has basically different regions that it gives more quote unquote attention to. So, for example, that's why like your hands are so sensitive, or like your tongue to taste is so sensitive versus like your back. It's not, it doesn't have, um, it doesn't take up as much space or like region in your somatosensory cortex. There's a lot
Wow.
more that goes into it in terms of like the size of the neurons and like the density of the neurons in those regions and the types of neurons. But
Yeah.
that's kind of like the general gist of that.
Wow. That is
Uh,
so cool. I know we're gonna get into it too with the
but yeah,
ligas and
yeah,
stuff. I'm curious because so with my cards,
yeah,
before like after I bought because I had several decks already like that were gifted to me and they're like the more like decorative ones. But then I got to a point where I tried learning with those and I was like, well, I want to know like obviously with the show, right? You can tell I'm very much about like history, cultural context. I was
yeah.
like, I want to know more about like the cards themselves and like their
Mhm.
history because I know that's important to like their quote definitions. And so I got a rider deck recently,
Yes. Yeah.
and I've been doing that one. And so when I brought them home, I was like, all right, well, let me, kind of cleanse these because these are in a shop. You don't know who's handling certain things. And
Yeah.
so, like you mentioned, that spiritual hygiene, right? So
Yeah.
with my little cauldron, I had some copal resin and I was,
Love it.
cleansing them with that and some Palo Santo chips. And so,
Nice.
um, now, like even still now, a couple weeks later, that I've been using them daily for this like tarot journal that I'm keeping,
Yeah.
to help me learn. Every time I shuffle them, that sense is engaged. That scent is still on them. So every
Mhm.
time I shuffle them, it's the first thing I'm doing right with them to do my daily pull. And you're talking about this, these senses that are engaged with it. That first one that came up for me was smell. That's the first
Yeah.
thing. Well, obviously the first thing is see because I have to look at them or feel. Actually, I don't know, right?
Well,
It's like
it might be both at once, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah, all these senses are engaged. Yeah, and it
Mhm.
really like puts me in that space, and I feel like that's like
Mhm.
another, along with tactical and with sight, the smell is just like another thing that puts me in that, no pun intended, that headspace, right? To
No,
do that
literally.
reading.
Literally. Well, I mean, and I think that's like, I don't know if you just saw my last TikTok, but like that's what I advise to do, or like what
Mm,
I recommended people doing for meditation. And it's perfect in tarot too. Like it puts you in that headspace, ready to go in a calm state. Like you do it in the same space every day. It works a little bit better if you associate a smell with it, because our olfactory bulb, which is the part in our brain that is responsible for, you know, us smelling smells,
yeah,
is connected, directly connected to our hippocampus and our amygdala. It has those pathways that go there. So that's why it's like very strong. Learning and like memory is so strong with smells. Like it
yeah.
instantly takes you back. So
I
yeah.
always I always heard that in like high school where they were like,
Mhm.
if you have an important test coming up, like spray like a perfume or a cologne or something on you that you're gonna wear during the test while you're studying, so that way like it
Right.
connects. So I wonder, like, is there some do you think there's some truth to that?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Absolutely right. You're like, I just told you.
But also like even like noises too, like
Mm,
there's a very foundational like textbook neuroscience study that everybody learns with like Pavlov's dog, and associating like a bell with a steak, and like the dog would salivate, and then they didn't even, I can't remember if they took the steak away or not, but basically they would ring the bell and the dog knew like, oh, it's steak time, I'm salivating, things like that. Like you can
wow.
have cues, basically cues that associate certain events or situations. Smell is one of the strongest, I'd say. So yeah, it definitely works. Especially if you're somebody who gets anxious for tests, like if you do some sort of aromatherapy that's calming, or something
Mhm.
that like really brings you comfort as you study, it kind of like reminds you and puts you in the headspace like, oh, like I know this, I've put the time in, and I'm ready to go. So
Wow. We're gonna jump to one more quick break and then we'll be
yeah.
right back. we're back. That is so interesting. Just one more thing on that thing about like
Yeah.
my sort of process with the cards is you had mentioned also sounds and like
Mhm.
Pavlov's dog and steak time. um,
Yeah.
yeah, I realized that like when I sit down to do my cards, one thing that I've also been doing, and I just like realized it right now, is I put on like this like kind of like lo-fi house music.
Love
And
it.
so I'm realizing now that I'm really like setting myself up in a way that I didn't like intentionally think of. I just started doing it and I was like, "Oh, I find this helpful to me." Um but without realizing, all the neuroscience behind it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, and that's the thing though, like, I think there's these all these things that we intuitively do that we naturally do. And people might be like afraid of predictions or this or that, but our brain is constantly predicting all the time. Like it's constantly calculating, oh, if I take this step, how high do I go so I don't trip and fall? Like
Mm,
it's just it's so instinctual to us and so natural to us that we don't think about this. And so like in our heads, like with Western science and how we think, like we've separated it as two different things, but it's all one. And
yeah.
so anyway, that's my
No,
thought.
that's so so cool. So the next one that I have on this short list is, and this is also again, I'm telling you all, we're gonna put the links and everything in the description so that you can go follow Dr. Flores. But something else that has come up on your page that I was really interested
Yeah.
in is the neuroscience of limpias and egg cleansing.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So I obviously, or maybe not obviously, because I'm talking about this, I grew up doing it. I also like even like during my breaks in graduate school, like I would go with my mom to the botanicas and be like, I need a cleansing. So when you go to the people who do the cleansings of the botanicas, they'll bring out the herbs, you'll walk over the fire, you'll do different things to release the negative energy, but they're essentially regulating your nervous system. Like that's the whole point. And I want to be very clear on what my page is and what my page isn't.
Hmm.
I am not here to debunk anything. I grew up in this culture. I love this culture. I ride for this culture, but also I know that we know a lot of things and sometimes we don't know why we know, right?
Yeah.
There's always the scientific aspect to it. I'm simply here to help bridge this scientific understanding to things that we have been doing for generations, for centuries. Um, and so, with that being said, I guess I really just want people to listen to this and hear this and almost give themselves a rational permission slip to be like, you know what? I shouldn't feel any shame or
Yeah.
anything about doing my cultural practices, whatever that is for people, or for doing these rituals or cleansings that help me because
Mhm.
they help me self regulate. It is what it is. And that's your nervous system, how your nervous system responds. We never know how it's actually going to respond to certain things or what things are going to traumatize us or trigger us or even regulate us. And so doing these different things ultimately helps to regulate the nervous system. As long as it's safe, you're not harming yourself or not harming anybody else, do it. Do the egg cleansing. So in terms of like the neuroscience and how it's regulating, like especially with the egg cleansing, I talked a lot about like rituals and the neuroscience of rituals, but as well, like when I say call in your protection, what that does when you call a guide to help you or a spirit guide or ancestor, it reduces cognitive load in your prefrontal cortex. So your prefrontal cortex is the one that's always responsible for making decisions,
Mhm.
for processing different situations. And when you get overwhelmed, you just sometimes you don't make decisions straight, like you don't make decisions right or whatever, right? You get
Yeah.
anxious, but doing that can help reduce cognitive load so that way you can you know deep a little bit more calm or breathe a little bit more calmly, breathe more deeply, but also just self-regulate. And I will say, like, as you're doing some of these cleansings, oftentimes whether you're doing it by yourself or with a healer, like there is a lot of breath work that goes into it, so it activates your parasympathetic nervous system, so that rest and digest. So when we're stressed, there's probably likely a lot of input going into your amygdala, which is the fear and threat detection.
Hmm.
And so doing these rituals can help decrease the activity of that. And so
Yeah.
when you're able to kind of like relax and calm down, and activate your parasympathetic system, which is like the rest and digest. You're able to breathe easier. You have a decrease in cortisol. Your blood pressure will like decrease. Stress will decrease. So, I mean, that's all part of it. It's all connected. It's all related.
Yeah. And when you say cognitive load, that is kind of like, is that literally just like the load of like the responsibilities and the decision making that you are taking on?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I remember learning this analogy that they taught us in like one of our intro neuroscience classes. Like the way to kind of think about that is, and like stuff with our prefrontal cortex and our brain is like a computer where we have RAM and like working
Mm,
RAM. So like when you have too many programs open on your computer, it slows down and you
yeah.
can't like be pressing buttons all the
Yeah.
time. That's like sort of the how the RAM is affected. Similar to like cognitive load to your brain. When you have too many things you're thinking about, you like kind of slow down and you like can't make decisions right.
Yeah.
Same thing.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because even and I appreciate what you were saying earlier about like, you're not here to debunk anything. You're rather bridge that gap, which
Yeah.
is a lot of what I believe too, is, I'm very into like the spiritual healing as well, but I think it's also important to approach it from like all angles holistically, right?
Mhm.
So I think yes, you should be doing the spiritual healing and that sort of work, but I think you also should be seeking help from like a medical professional or
Right.
a
Right.
psychiatrist or what have you, right? Approach it from all angles. And so it's interesting, this idea of like when you're calling in the ancestors, that relieves the cognitive load, because it's like you're literally calling for backup, but not only is
Mhm.
it like spiritual backup, it's also like reducing that stress on your brain. I think that is so cool, because it's like,
Yeah.
even for people who are skeptics and who think, well, like, what are you actually doing when you call in your ancestors? Like, what does that mean? It's like, well, even if you don't believe in it, physically in your brain, there is a process happening that is helping. You are getting some sort of
Yes.
backup, whether or not you believe the guides or the ancestors are actually there.
Right.
Um, which I do believe, but it's really
Right.
cool to know now that like it's
It's
happening
real.
on multiple fronts. Yeah.
Right. Like these things have real physiological consequences on our body. The same way that like when we release trauma, like for example, have you read the book The Body Keeps the Score?
I have not, but I've
Okay.
heard a lot about it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
I don't know
I
if I'm
read it.
ready for it.
Yeah, no, okay. I was gonna say I read it in graduate school as an intellectual, and then I finished the book and I was like, I just read about like generations of families. Like I
Yeah.
like wasn't prepared. I was not prepared for that information.
Yeah.
So, but it was so informative and it was so good. Um, but it really kind of taught me that our brain, like one of it has a lot of jobs, but a big job that it does is it just wants to keep us safe. And one of
Mhm.
the ways it does that is it does help the body keep the score. So, like when you have these intense situations or intense traumas that happen, your muscles can literally hold in that tension. And so, I know, like in a lot of stuff that we've talked about, or even in our culture, like they talk about like the how emotions can make us sick, like
Mhm.
susto, like right,
Mhm.
like we can literally hold that in our body and
Yeah.
have like intense aches and pains and that leads to other things and that stresses out other parts in our body, right? Because it's all working together in tandem. So it's like, yeah, like a good, massage or a good limpia, like will probably help.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So this is something that I think people have seen probably in like, especially with, and that just happened right now. You've seen it happen a couple times this interview, and it's flaring up more because I'm getting a bit nervous. I
Mm,
have this like tick that I
mm,
edit out of my episodes, and I'm gonna leave it in this part for people to hear it. But I think that that is a result of some form of like trauma that I've experienced, because I didn't always
mm,
have this. And I feel very comfortable bringing this up to you, because not only your work as a professional, but I think just you as a person, and I'm sure you get this all the time too, but it's just like, I feel it coming up and it feels relevant to the conversation. And I said this over the Christmas break with my family too. I was like, that, oh my God, this is crazy. I'm putting all these pieces together. I feel like the conspiracy theorist tying the
I
red strings
connect.
together.
Yes,
It does, because I literally, and and I will get my boyfriend in here if I need to, but I know that you believe me. I said to my family over the Christmas break a few weeks ago, I was like, I think I want to go see like a neurologist or something
Mm,
about this,
mhm.
because I've spoken to other healers about it, but
Yeah,
like I said, approach it from all
yeah,
angles, um, where it's just this like, I don't know, like you're talking about this too, the body keeps a score, and I'm like, I think that is one of them, and I think it's so very interesting that as a person who uses their voice a lot, it's interesting that that has manifested for me in that way
yeah.
with my voice. It's like somewhere in the throat chakra, it's like in like physically it's in the jaw, and it
Hmm.
affects my speech. As
Hmm.
someone who is a podcaster, who is very
Yeah,
expressive, who like likes to perform, um so it's very interesting
interesting.
that this conversation is coming up uh for me.
Do
So
you, yeah, do you ever do like body scans, like meditation body scans and
I
talking to your
haven't.
body?
Mm-mm.
I mean, we can talk about that after, or we can
Yeah.
talk about it now. But I think that could be something helpful and informative, like when you do go talk to your doctor, or when
Hmm.
you do like, Google things. Um, your body does talk to you in different ways, whether it's like physically or even like when you're in a meditation and it's giving you images. Again, like
Hmm.
the images can help you associate different things from your past understanding and things with your intuition and things like that. So anyway, I have a
Very
I have a
interesting.
lot of but yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's fascinating.
And that's also like that's the first time I've ever addressed that
Mm,
on here, or I think
yeah,
publicly,
yeah.
to like the internet. So and it is something that like I will edit out a lot, because I'm like, I don't like the way it sounds, or like it makes me feel weird, and I think maybe that is part of that conversation that needs to be had, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, it just felt really relevant to bring up here, and I think it is also relevant to the next sort of thing. Look at me being a professional and segueing it, making it work, making my trauma work for me. Um,
Too.
is I wanted to talk more about in general. I know we just talked about like limpias and egg cleansing, and these fall under that category, but like maybe the more general idea of energy healing, because there are lots of different practices that people use, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so is there anything else under that sort of like energy healing umbrella that you could go into in terms of neuroscience?
Honestly, a lot of the stuff overlaps like
Yeah.
with these different processes, which is like good and also bad, but good for the most part. Because our brain is constantly trying to process and assess whatever is going on in our external environment. In terms of energy healing, so like if you're doing something like Reiki or even like, like laying hands, like, even in the church when people like lay hands on people. um
Mm-hmm.
there are different like tinglings, bodily sensations that can happen, like tingling, warmth, all of that. It's our cortex, our cingulate cortex, that's involved in processing some of these signals.
And what
Um,
is that?
Let me double check and make,
Okay.
because it's like so many brain regions work together.
Yeah.
I want to say the right thing, and it's like pretty sure it's the cingulate cortex.
Yeah.
When we have like a lot of cortexes, like we have our
Yeah.
posterior cingulate cortex, anterior. Anyway,
It's like a whole like city in there of
it's
like,
a whole, it literally, I knew this really intense neurosurgeon at Rochester, and he was just like crazy in the best way. But I remember he gave this talk, and he was talking about like how the brain rules everything in your body.
mhm,
And at the end of the day, people are like at the mercy of their brain, because he's
yeah.
like, well, if you're brain dead, like that's it. But if you have other parts in your body that are dead, there's still hope for you if you have brain activity. And like he closed the talk and he's like, and the brain, that's where God lives.
Whoa, I got chills.
Yeah. And I was like, he's
Have you ever seen this show? This is complete, well, not completely off topic, but I feel like
right.
you may enjoy it. Have you ever heard of this show called Dimension 20?
No, what is that?
So it is on this
Yeah.
channel, this like Roku channel called Dropout TV, which was formerly College Humor back in the day.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're called Dropout TV now, but they have this show called Dimension 20, and they're playing D&D basically. But it's with like comedians, performers, like professional D&D players. Like it's really interesting, but they did a season maybe like a year ago, and I forgot what they called it. It's still on there though, but it was all about like the setting. It took place in a person's brain, and so it was really interesting. I feel like you may be into it. I'll send you a link for it later, but
Yeah,
um,
yeah, for sure.
yeah, I just thought of it, and I was like, I wonder what she would think of this, because yeah, it was all about the neurology of this person, and the campaign was to keep this person alive through like real life events that were
Mm,
happening, but there were like the characters in this campaign, they were in it was like Inside Out basically, but they were like trying to keep him alive in this sort of
yeah.
real life scenario. Yeah.
Also, back to the answer.
Yes.
It is both the insular and the cingulate cortex. And
Got
so the
it.
cingulate cortex as well, like I said, you have like your anterior, your posterior. So it's like the cortex that's part in the like front of your brain, the back of the brain, the middle of the brain. Those are also involved in like emotional processing and feeling things. Insular cortex is involved in sort of those like physiological shifts that can happen. So
Hmm.
like, you know, if you're laying down and you're doing your deep breathing, it's one of those things that like you can feel like the tingles, or it basically helps you to kind of go in and quiet in your body, or it supports, you know, the signals where you go in and quiet in your body and can feel those small little shifts.
Yeah.
And so again, that's all connected as well with like the amygdala and the hippocampus, and like reducing, you know, fear, or the input of um you know, the signal of fear into our amygdala, so it kind of decreases activity so that it relaxes. And then when you're sending those different signals to your brain, again, you're bringing in the parasympathetic nervous system with energy healing, because you're doing the breath work, also
Mm.
stimulating the vagus nerve, also likely stimulating the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is basically the axis between like your brain and your gut and your
Mm.
body, right? So like when people
Yeah.
say, "Oh, I have a gut feeling," or like people say after energy sessions they get super tired, or like if they felt like they did a cleansing and they needed to throw up, like it's because the nervous system is essentially down regulating in a
Mm.
very quick manner, especially in those cases where people say they have like really adverse reactions where they cry or shake or vomit. It's because it's like their body's very quickly shifting into that relaxation state, or sorry, the brain is helping their body shift into the relaxation state. And so it
Yeah.
has to catch up. And so sometimes you have that like vagus nerve reaction with the brainstem as well that
Yeah.
controls your gag reflex. So that can
Wow.
happen. So that
Wow.
in terms of like everything associated with energy healing and what's happening, um, a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff is happening. But
Wow.
um, yeah, and so again with like the vagus nerve and the deep breathing and bringing oxygen to your body and to your brain, and you know, decreasing your blood pressure and all of that good stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow. Well, we are approaching the end of our time here. And before we go, I do want to ask, I ask all my guests if
yeah.
you've had your own paranormal encounter that you
Oh
would like to share with us.
yes. Oh my gosh, I still tell it to this day. I'll tell it to anybody who will listen.
We're all ears.
Okay, so I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, and the
Hmm.
house I grew up in was this old house from the 1920s. 19, yeah, the 1920s, I want to say, or the 1930s. And the area that we lived in Des Moines, before there were even houses in that area, there was a man-made lake. And it's just, I don't know, I feel like that matters for the area, but anyway, so there's a bunch of old houses. And my mom has this genetic factor for blood clots. And so when I was little, she would get sick a lot and go to the hospital, because at the time they were still kind of like figuring it out or like
Hmm.
managing it. And I was about 8. And you know, I talked about my grandma because my grandma lived with us. She helped raise me, especially with like my mom and dad working all the time, or like if my mom was sick, she was always there. And so I remember there was this one month where she was like basically in the hospital, and then finally she had come home and she could like be on bed rest. And so I was like getting ready for school, and in her room they had this huge mirror that spanned the wall
Mm.
and it faced the bed. Which like now I now knowing what she knows, I don't think she would do that ever again.
Yeah.
Knowing what we know now.
Yeah.
But And for those that don't know, mirrors like facing you during sleep, just terrible nightmares, not good stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she had this whole mirror facing her bed, and she had the light on. And so I was like, oh, I should go see her, before I go to school. I just like want to check on her. I want to like give my mom a hug and a kiss. Like, as a kid, I was like 8.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw her in bed, and I saw like her whole half, her head, everything. I saw her move. And I was like, oh, mom, like, do you want me to shut off the light? And in Spanish, I sounded like she was tired, like she was still kind of half asleep. And she's like, no, apague la luz. Like, I'm good. And I was like, you sure? Do you need anything? And she's like, no. And she had her covers and she moved in bed. And I was like, oh, I want to give her a kiss goodbye. And I was like, no, I don't want to bother her. And then I leave her room, and immediately I hear my grandma and her talking in the living room.
Stop. I just got full body chills. Oh my God. Okay. Okay.
And like there's no way, like, to get from her room to the living room was a hallway. Like, she was not gonna pass me. I ran from her room to the living room because I'm like, I'm not trying to see what that is in the room. I'm not trying to see what that is. And I was like, have you been here the whole time? What are you doing? She's like, yeah, I've been up talking with your grandma like since 7 this morning. And it was like 7:45. Like, I was getting ready to go to school. And I was like, this just happened. And she's like, what? And she went to go look in the room. And of course, nothing was there. And because it responded to me and like mimicked her voice, mimicked her image, and I saw it in the mirror, like, we think it was something demonic because when it mimics like that, like, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
And one thing I do know about the house that I lived in, that I grew up in, my mom said, and she didn't tell us this until like later, which is just like, but she's like, yeah, like, before we bought the house, they told us they had to do a lot of cleanup and that they found like satanic stuff around the house. And I'm like, that explains it. That explains
Girl.
everything.
Oh my God.
Like, like the little upside down pentagrams, like candles. I'm like, "Ah, not that candles are bad, but
Yeah, you don't know what they're being used for. And then to see that, did your mom and your grandma like do anything after you told them what you saw? Like,
I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember
okay.
because I think I blocked it out.
Oh my, I mean, oh
I'm
my
sure they
God.
did. I'm sure they did. Cause like that's how they are. And I remember like hugging my mom. I never thought about the fact that I don't remember after that.
I don't know, maybe worth following up on. But also
Yeah.
like you probably that was probably your intuition being like, no, I'm not gonna go over there. Whether or not you were thinking like, I don't want to bother her, but maybe like internally your intuition or maybe someone was watching over you was like,
Yeah.
do not approach,
Don't go.
stay away from that. Oh, I keep getting chills like running up my body.
Like,
I
oh.
hated that.
But just like I could not imagine, like, what if I had gone over to her? What would I have seen? I don't even want to think about it, but like it was a full person. It was a full person.
That is disgusting.
It's,
And you know what's crazy? I just like had a recovered memory of the bed that my mom used to have
uh-huh.
growing up. And then I used to sleep in this bed. Like the headboard, it was like a built-in like kind of dresser, like a small sort of dresser.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But like the headboard itself, there was a mirror in it.
Mm.
And now I'm like, I feel like that explains a lot of things.
Yeah. That
Like we
probably
should not
does.
have had that in the house, much less been like sleeping in it. It was like it made its way through generations, of course. Like, oh, like and I know the mirror thing now, but I never thought about that bed from growing up. And then the fact that your mom in her room, it showed the entire bed, not even just like a small mirror. It was like, nope, this big ass portal. Oh my God.
Yes. It was so scary. It was so scary. I
That
never,
is
yeah.
oof. Okay. I
Mhm.
hated that so much. Thank you for but it was so good. Thank you for
Like,
sharing that.
smoke some herb, something.
Honestly, something. Oh my gosh. Well, Dr. Flores, thank you so much for your time today. I really
Yes,
appreciate it.
thank you so much
If
for having me.
of course, if folks wanted to follow you online or look up your work, where can they find you? Where are you?
Yes, I'm on all socials, so Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. You can find me at LaTarotina, so LaTarotina. So I'm LaTarotina on all socials. If you wanted to book a reading, connect with me, you can go to my website at www.latarotina.com. So I have some different offerings there for people, and yeah, so all good stuff. I'll probably be writing some blogs soon and just kind of hanging out, exploring the metaphysical, explaining what I can of the healing arts and the metaphysical. But yes. Thank
Awesome. Thank you so much. Welcome back, Wolf friends. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and a huge thank you to Dr. Flores. Okay, I need you all's comments on this one. I need to know what you all thought. I'm very excited to have made this connection with Dr. Flores. I can tell that we were, and she said this too, that we are on the same wavelength. This was a really enlightening conversation for me personally, and I hope that you all took as much away from it as I did. I'm not going to promise you anything, but if you all have questions about anything that we spoke about in this episode, or maybe that it inspired a thought, please send it in to me, because I can see us, and I don't want to pigeonhole her. So I'm not going to make any promises. This is just on like my fingers crossed wish list that we may work together in the future. I literally didn't say this to her. I'm just bringing this up now. So we'll see what happens. But she was so cool, and she was so willing to share her knowledge and her expertise that I think it'd be cool to get some questions from y'all. And if you have them, maybe we can do like a bonus, like a mini episode or something where we go through those questions. Or actually, honestly, do yourself the favor, go follow her on her pages, book some time with her on her website, and ask her those questions yourself, because you could probably get it quicker that way, and I won't be in the way to distract from it. But because yeah, she's so great. So again, please go follow her online. Again, that's latarotina.com or at latarotina on the social media. All of that is linked in the description below. And Dr. Flores also mentioned that she would try to send over some resources, some papers and things like that. So those will be linked in the description of the episode below. As always, please support Susto by sharing it with your coven. Engage with it wherever you are listening. Leave it positive ratings and reviews. And you can also support Susto for $3 or more a month by visiting patreon.com/Susto podcast. And I'd like to give a very major thank you to this episode's patrons. And you are Liza, Rachel, Alejandra, Luther, April, D, Josette, Sam, Mandy, Lori, Jeannie, Desiree C, Ashes, Neressa, Rachel A, Azucena, Marlene, Chata, Lainey, Desiree A, Ricardo, Vanessa, Maritza, Nieves, Mannermall, Iris, Mar, Flor, Selena, Nightingale, Clint, Rachel W, and Armani. Thank you so much for your support. It truly means the underworld to me. I will talk to you all in the next one, and until then, no te asustes. Bye.